You know, religions are born and religions die. It is a constant. It is something that is inevitable. At some point in the history of man, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Brahmanism, it will all die. The reason why a statement like this can be made is because when you look at history that we know of it, and our recorded history goes back to about 9 to 12,000 years ago. From 9 to 12,000 years ago, starting with Göbekli Tepe and Taran Tepe, and looking at the Sumerians and the Kemetics and so on and so forth, cultures all over the world, religion has grown, religion has died. And to answer Tony's question here, what we think the first man's thought process on religion was looking at the awesome power of nature. Right now, I am looking at the outer swirls of Hurricane Helen. And 3,000 years ago, man had no idea how these hurricanes came about. We had no idea how rain came about. They had no idea about many things of volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and tornadoes, and those things were amazing, frightening, and man just couldn't understand it. Why does the grass grow? Why is there a drought? So man does what many people in today's traditional religions do. When there is an answer to which they do not know of, God of the gaps appear. And that is what happened. The volcano erupt. We don't know why. There must be a God involved, and the God is angry with us. Let's sacrifice some children, or sacrifice an animal, or sacrifice someone. Oh, we needed to keep rain and for the crops, so every day we have to offer up the heart of a man to the gods. To Quetzalcoatl, he must have his heart of man. Most religions came out of the fact of man not understanding how nature works and believing that if they made sacrifices to these gods, that these gods will continue to provide for them, provide food and provide the herds and give them safety and cure diseases and things of that nature. They believed the wind that blows was a god. And so they made up stories. Ra had Jeb and Nut, the waters below and the waters above. But the embrace was so tight that he had another child, Shu. And Shu was the wind that blew the separation between the waters so that land will appear. Stories were created. And when people began to believe these stories, and they began to believe that if they gave offerings to these gods, then important positions began to be created. The shaman, the priest, the pastor, the shepherd. And so as these positions began to be created, control over the people was then incorporated into it. But I think the worst part of it is the lack of man's ability to look within himself. You know, there's an old Brahmin story. Man and all the other gods were living on the earth. Man was doing many destructive things on the earth. And so the other gods had a council with Brahman. And they said, man is so destructive, we need to take his godhead. One suggested that they bury it deep in the ground. But Brahma said that one day they would dig deep enough and they will be able to find it again. Another said, let's throw it in the ocean. Another Brahmin said that one day man will dive deep in the ocean and he will find it again. But let's put it on the highest mountain. And Brahma said, one day man will climb that mountain and find his godhead again. So Brahma, where should we put it? The others proclaimed. Brahman suggested that we will hide the godhead of man in the one place he will never think to look. And that is inside himself. You see, man feels small when you look at the awesomeness of nature. And so man looks outside of himself for divinity. He places divinity in the clouds. He places divinity in the sun and the stars, in the ocean, the currents, the waves, the wind. He places divinity in everything that exists except himself. And because thousands of generations of man have went by with it being taught from parent to child, parent to child, parent to child, that divinity is outside of you. Man has a hole inside himself that makes him want divinity, but can't see it inside himself. So he seeks it outside of himself and begins to worship it, begins to think that he has understanding of it, makes him think that there is this particular God who lives on the mountain, and we know the personality of this God. This is why Zeus has characteristics that are human-like. This is why Oshun has characteristics that are human-like. This is why every God has human characteristics, because man created that God to replace what he cannot find, to replace what he refuses to seek for himself, which is the divinity within himself. You see, if there was or is a creator of this universe that put all these natural laws into place that just flow in the perfect chaos that it is in, because it is a perfect chaos, then it would be unknowable. It would be unidentifiable. You wouldn't be able to give it characteristics because you wouldn't have the mind to be able to define it or to know it. The Hermetics, the alchemists, call this the all. Infinite mind, infinite intelligence. I call it I don't know. But what I do know is that there is no God of the wind. There is no God of the sun. There is no Allah. There is no Yahweh or Jehovah. There is no biblical version of Jesus. Might have been a dude walking around named Yeshua who thought that he was going to break up the Roman Empire and free the Israelite people. But there is no biblical Jesus. There is no one that I need my salvation from other than myself. And when people wake up and realize that the only salvation that they will ever be able to truly attain is by going inside and looking deep inside of the one, that they refuse to do so, then that's when they will gain their salvation. Because in order to do that, you have to be willing to look at the parts of you that you are not going to like. People call it your shadow self. I call it the negative portions of your brain. I call it the true devil. It's the devil inside. When you're willing to look inside the devil inside and conquer that devil, submit that devil to your will, which then allows you to vibrate on a higher scale, to vibrate more towards the God inside you, the God mind, whether you call it the Buddha mind or the Christ mind. When you're able to vibrate and polarize yourself on the God mind, that's when you become the only deity that exists. And that is the one that is within you, because it is the only one that is observable. It's the only one that can be tested. So it's the only one that can be proven. So I hope that answers your question. And always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.